Good morning. It is Thursday, the 4th of December. I'm Maeve McMahon, and this is Europe Today, Euronews' daily live fix of European news and analysis. Coming up today, after key talks in Brussels, Nato has said it is ready to do what it takes to protect Europe. This in response to Vladimir Putin's comments that Russia did not want it, but would be ready for war with Europe. Euronews' correspondent Shona Murray has spent most of the week over at the NATO headquarters outside Brussels and joins me now on set for an update. Good morning, Shona.
Maeve.
Great to have you with us.
Yep.
Look, what was said over at NATO?
Well, I think that is a very important point that we heard there from Vladimir Putin, saying he would have war with Europe. But Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, said NATO is a defensive alliance, has no interest in war with Europe, or with Russia, of course, but it will support Ukraine for all its needs. It's also really atop the agenda was the last few days was, of course, these talks with the US and Ukraine and Russia. Not a huge amount of optimism from member states of NATO, saying really that they don't believe that Russia is willing to come to the table. But they are also saying it's crunch time. And really the consensus in NATO was the two most important things are territory and security guarantees. And we're nowhere near that point yet.
So all that hope of the last 2 weeks is gone?
Well, yeah. I mean, there wasn't a huge amount of hope anyway, but they're saying there's crunch time because at least there is some movement. But yeah, there isn't a huge amount of hope, yeah.
And meanwhile, the European Commission said yesterday they will move ahead with that loan for Ukraine using frozen Russian assets, but they don't have Belgium on board yet.
No, they don't. They announced yesterday a legal workaround that would help indemnify Belgium against potential risks, major risks that exist for Belgium, because 180 billion euro of those Russian frozen assets are here in Belgium. But the Belgians are saying this isn't good enough and there are still major risks ahead for them. So I asked Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, yesterday what he thought should be done with these assets.
We look at Ukraine for next year. If the reparations loan / defreezing the assets or making the assets mobilized, whatever the exact phrase is we are using, if that is not happening, then it is absolutely clear that we need to get the money in another way. And I felt a commitment in the room, first, to see how far we can get. But again, that's on the EU side of town. First of all, to get this done. But there was also a clear understanding that if somehow this is not working out, Ukraine cannot be left alone.
Now, the issue, of course, of frozen assets doesn't normally come up at NATO, but this is very important because the US previously in the 28-point plan for Ukraine has said that it might want to use those assets, which is another reason why the EU has come out and said, well, look, we really need to ensure that they stay in Europe. And that's why they have these legal guarantees. So it's a major, major issue for Europe.
This will be on the table, I imagine, for the next few weeks?
It's going to be huge, particularly at the next European Council meeting in a couple of weeks' time. There's going to be a showdown, as one source said to me.
A showdown. So stay tuned to Euronews and to Shona Murray's reporting for that. Thank you so much for being with us here live on Europe Today, Shona Murray. But now, coming up, we'll be joined by Roxana Minsatu, the Executive Vice President of the European Commission. The Romanian socialist politician spent years as Minister for European Funds back home and also had a stint as a member of the European Parliament. And now her wide portfolio includes social rights, skills, quality jobs and preparedness, where she's trying to keep the social agenda alive. Commissioner Minsatu, welcome to Europe Today. Great to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here. Good morning.
And you're here, of course, because you have a busy day. You're presenting your plan for quality jobs in Europe. And unemployment is down here, but of course quality jobs are scarce. How will you fix this problem?
Yeah, we present Europe's strategy for quality employment. We're looking at three directions. First, how do we keep jobs in Europe in key industries and how we create new jobs, looking at the green transition, at the digital transition. Second, how we modernize employment, algorithmic management, AI in the workplace. We really need to do something about that. And third, of course, we need to consider the fairness of jobs, wages, health and safety in the workplace, just to name a few dimensions.
And with factory closures and people having to reskill and upskill, how can you help them with this transition, which is difficult?
We presented, even in the spring, our Union of Skills, our skills let's say, strategy in Europe, where we proposed a skills guarantee for workers. And now we are starting to pilot it. It's dedicated to the automotive sector and the supply chain, because we see there a lot of restructuring and a lot of shifts due to several, of course, challenges that the industry is facing. And we are testing different models. Let's see what the best scenarios will be. Supporting workers through, of course, skilling, upskilling, reskilling, subsidizing the employer in the context in which we might see the worker moving from a certain industry like automotive to another one, or from a company to another company, or from a branch to another branch. Mentoring and all these elements together should be a package that would ensure for automotive skilled workers a smooth transition to a better job or to a similar industry.
And what about AI? How will that radically transform the workplace here in the EU?
AI is clearly affecting jobs across the world. Some jobs for sure will be transformed or will disappear, and some will be functioning with AI assistance. Our concern is that where we will have AI as a boss, not only as an assistant, we need to create trustworthy environments and trust for SMEs, therefore corporations, and for workers to use and work with these systems. And so we are looking to discuss whether we need more minimum regulatory frameworks in Europe. We launched today the first phase consultation for a Quality Jobs Act that will look also at the need. We'll ask social partners, of course, do we need these minimum frameworks to see AI in the workplace as a trustworthy resource in the relation between employer and employee?
But how are you pushing your social agenda and the regulation that you want in a commission which, of course, is focused on competitiveness? The EPP, of course, won the elections. They're setting the agenda, not the socialists.
Absolutely, and we work together very closely. I work together with Henna Virkkunen, our Vice President for Technology, very closely, because competitiveness is absolutely essential for us to be able to deliver quality jobs, but we cannot, as Europe, I think, achieve competitiveness if we forego or if we lower the standards on employment. So we need to do this together, balancing the two. And with my colleague, of course, on digital and on AI, we're working twofold. First, to increase the skills of workers across ages, regions, sectors in AI, and this is quite important. And second, without creating burden, without creating overlaps, because we have the AI Act, we have the GDPR, we don't want to affect the agility of European industry. But where we have gaps, we need to see if we need regulations that create minimum protections for workers.
And is social Europe dead?
No, social Europe is not dead. Social Europe is the backbone of the European Union. Without the social fibre, without social cohesion, the EU would have, I think, enormous challenges politically to go ahead. So it is not only responsible, it is quite existential to continue to invest in how we adapt our social model and how we strengthen it in front of all these changes.
And what about the credibility of the EU institutions? If you look at this week, a corruption scandal allegedly hitting the EAS, the Foreign Chief Service. I know you're a former minister in charge of public procurement and funding. What is your view on all this?
I cannot say that other than I was shocked because I had met Federica Mogherini a while back. Of course, I cannot comment on the investigation, but it is important that these investigations will be followed up thoroughly because it's EU money, it's taxpayers' money, and again, it's the trust in European institutions that needs to be defended. But absolutely, I was absolutely shocked by the news when it broke out.
Okay, Commissioner Minsatu, thank you so much for coming into us this morning on Europe Today. You have, of course, a very busy day, so best of luck with that. And another politician having an intense day is France's President Macron, who's currently on his fourth trip to China amid tensions over Ukraine. The French president is spending 3 days discussing trade, geopolitics and Ukraine. For more on his visit, we can now actually cross over to Paris and bring in our correspondent, Sofia Katsankova. Good morning, Sofia. Great to have you with us this morning on Europe Today. Just tell us, why is President Macron in China and what exactly is at stake?
Well, the stakes are high on two fronts, Maeve. First, Ukraine, and second, trade. On Ukraine, Macron wants China to use its leverage over its closest major partner, Russia, to try and convince Russian President Vladimir Putin towards a ceasefire in Ukraine. And this comes just days after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was in Paris. But the two sides remain far apart on what an end to this conflict should look like, with, for example, Beijing still supplying major drone components to Russia. And then when it comes to trade, well, France wants to attract more Chinese investment to Paris, but also to the EU. And one of the major issues with trade is the trade imbalance. As a reminder, Europe runs a 300 billion euro trade deficit with China, driven by ultra-competitive Chinese electric vehicles, as well as low-cost imports from platforms like Shein, Temu, and Alibaba. And at the press conference this Thursday morning, Macron summed up some of these major trade challenges.
L'Europe et la Chine ont un rôle à jouer pour poser avec
the EU and China have a role to play in laying the foundations for a fair and robust economic governance based on the rules rather than the law of the strongest. These imbalances are unsustainable and pose the risk of financial crisis. They jeopardize our ability to grow together. We have everything to gain from a better coordination.
À mieux nous coordonner, l'Europe et la Chine ont un rôle à jouer pour poser.
So despite these tensions, Macron and Xi Jinping still signed 12 cooperation agreements on bilateral investment, nuclear energy, and even panda conservation. Back to you, Brussels.
So what does this mean then for France? And of course the EU, because he's representing as well, Sophia, the European Union there.
Yes, Maeve, as you said. So for France and the EU, this visit is about balancing a relationship with both a country that they view as a partner, but also a competitor. It's a more, balanced global economy, with China consuming more and exporting less, with the EU still maintaining access to the world's second largest economy. And from Macron, it's also important to shape a coordinated European approach ahead of France hosting the G7 summit next year in Evian. And more broadly, this trip also reflects France's and the EU's attempt to present a united but not too confrontational front with China. Back to you, Maeve.
Okay, Sofia Kaskankova, thank you so much for that live update from Paris. We'll, of course, keep you up to speed on Macron's visit and any business deals that he clinches. Keep an eye, of course, on Euronews.com. But now it is time to talk about the Eurovision Song Contest. The famous festival is hanging on a thread after the boycott of several countries, including Spain, one of the 5 largest contributors to the Eurovision. They argue that Israel should get the same treatment as Russia, which was excluded in 2022 after Ukraine's invasion. Jakub Janis reports.
Oh, the Eurovision. One would say it's a celebration of music that unites the whole Europe. And for some reason, Australia too. But your daily reporter has a different take. To him, it's all about the game of bingo that you play every May with your loved ones. And as at Euronews, we are one big family. So why don't we cast some bets? This year's Eurovision is facing a historic meltdown, with some countries threatening to boycott the party. Why, you ask? You see, there are 2 reasons. Allegations of Israel topping last year's public vote is one. And there is also war in Gaza, which Spain argues crosses a red line. So, here is the grid. If Israel is not excluded, Spain, Slovenia, Ireland and the Netherlands are out. But if Israel is excluded, reports say Germany and Austria would be out then. And as for our friends from Australia, they haven't commented on that yet. And I mean the country down under, not the host country. Sounds a bit complex, doesn't it? The voting happens today and tomorrow in Geneva, where Eurovision bosses will decide the new rules to solve the crisis. So go on, take your bingo cards and guess who will be singing this year.
Jakub Janis reporting there for us. Well, this brings this Thursday's edition of Europe Today to an end. Thank you so much for tuning in. For more news in depth, visit Euronews.com. And we'll be back again tomorrow morning, where we'll be joined by the EU Commissioner responsible for housing and energy, Dan Jorgensen. So don't miss that. See you tomorrow on Euronews.